Hello and welcome to today's Fat Tail Daily. I'm really glad to have Ryan Dints on as usual on a Monday. We were just having a good old chinwag just there, and I said to Ryan we should have been recording this. What do you
Yeah,
think?
too
I
late
mean,
now. Yeah.
a lot's happened since we last spoke, which was last Monday.
I know a week's a long time in investment markets now, isn't it? So what happened last week was that was the election. It was the Melbourne Cup, and the election was coming up, and I definitely got the Melbourne Cup wrong. But so far, the markets seem to be liking the election of Trump, and we've seen pretty decent rallies in a number of areas that I'm invested in.
Yeah.
Some craziness in the Bitcoin price over the weekend. Things really seem to be heating up there. And it just seems like, there's a lot of changes going to happen over the next few months, and markets are now scrambling to try and work out what it means.
And we were just saying it's setting up for a super bullish 2025. Now, you can argue about fundamentals and what price of things should be doing. We talked a little bit this morning that the impact on the Aussie market hasn't right come through, but America seems to be super bullish about the new administration coming in.
Yeah, I think the worry for the Aussie market, and our colleague Greg Cameron was saying that this morning, is that the potential of the China trade war resumption might be impacting the Aussie market a little bit with potential flow-on effects from into our miners, or even some saying that the proposed China stimulus that came out recently might not be as good as the market initially hoped. So, if you remember a few weeks back, the market rallied on the China, I can't remember how much it was, but it was like, $3 trillion stimulus or something ridiculous. And there was a decent rise in copper and iron ore and different miners. And now they've gone to the other bit where they say, oh, maybe they won't play out like that. So, but we'll see. We'll see. I think a lot of people are making a lot of projections of their own political bias onto what happens next, and the psychological factors of trying to guess the future are impacting markets now. I think the key as investors is to try and look beyond those psychological factors and actually see where the probabilities lie and see where the real changes might happen. And once you've done your research, and that's probably the point of today's piece, once you've done your research and you've worked out what you think is the truth of the matter, then you lay down your investments and implement your strategy no matter what other people think. As long as you've done the work, you have to be confident and not be swayed by the emotions of the market and the media and all that other stuff.
Yeah. Just before we get into the question of today's topic of your article, how do you? I mean, everyone knows you're our tech and specifically crypto guy. Obviously, you've been advising people dollar cost average into Bitcoin for a long time. Side note: there will be one. There was a brilliant comment on our last video, which I'm going to address. So that person is going to switch off as soon as we mention the word Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But how do you keep your head when? I mean, it's at all-time highs. I think the last time I checked, it was over 80,000 US dollars a Bitcoin. Crazy when you think about it. That only like 14 years ago, you could buy a pizza for it. For how many? How many did it cost? 20,000 Bitcoin for one
Yeah.
pizza.
Yeah. It's been an amazing story, Bitcoin, and it's a story that continues to fool a lot of people. And this maybe comes to the comment the person put on our last week's article, but it's something you actually have to do the work to understand what it is. And if you don't do the work, it just looks from the outside like some ridiculous cult that's just betting on the fact that they want to make money. But as you said, it's been around for what, 2009 now, or 2008 when the white paper was released. So we're not talking about a tulip bubble. We're not talking about something that came and went. It's something that's long standing. It's gone through various ups and down cycles, but the trajectory is higher. Now, almost everyone I've told to buy Bitcoin over the last decade or so, as of we're talking right now, is probably making money. The earlier they got in, the more they would have made. And yet we still have a huge part of the population that thinks this is some Ponzi that must fail someday. Uh, but when you ask them why they think that, they can't really articulate it. It's just because they don't really know what it is and they don't understand it. And Bitcoin is a very interesting asset on a number of angles. And a lot of people that are skeptics, when they look into it, they become believers. But they have to do that interim part of the work. Take BlackRock, for example. BlackRock in 2017-18 called I think, Bitcoin an index of scam or Ponzi index. Fast forward to 2023, and Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, announced to the world that BlackRock was going to be applying for a Bitcoin spot ETF. And then he's been on CNBC for the past year saying how that Bitcoin is an amazing asset that's a defense against fiat debasement and prolific government debt and spending, which is something like, we've been talking about for years. But this man thought it was a scam, did the work, changed his mind on it, and now he's an advocate for it. And that's a really common tale. What gets in the way of that process is people's egos sometimes, and also people will look at the price today and they'll see that one Bitcoin is now 122,000 Aussie dollars per Bitcoin, and they'll think, "Oh, I've missed the boat on that. It's too expensive now." Last time I looked, it was 20,000. Now it's ridiculous amounts. But that negates two things. One, it's a tiny fraction of the total size of the global market. Still, it's 1/14 the size of gold, for example, and gold's not that large a part of the global market. And you can buy part of a Bitcoin. You can do stuff like we talked about all the time, dollar cost average in, put little bits at a time, buy 0.00001 Bitcoin every week or every month, and use it as a savings technology. And it does fulfill a role. It's not just a Ponzi. It's an asset that lives outside the mainstream finance industry. It's a scarce asset, which means it can't be debased like the dollars in your pocket are, as everyone's experienced with inflation. It is censorship resistant. I can transact with my Bitcoin to anyone, anywhere in the world without someone stopping me. And it's portable. I can take it with me. It's not like gold. I don't need to lumber around all this heavy gold. It's digital. I can buy stuff with it online. There's actually a million other stuff you can do that people don't know about because they can't get over that first impression that this is a Ponzi that somehow doesn't make sense. You need to do the work. And again, come back to today's piece. You have to believe that markets are not stupid eventually. Markets tend to get things right. And what markets are telling you right now as Bitcoin hits new all-time highs is that this is an asset with value. And this is an asset that means something to a lot of people. So you can choose to ignore that still and be on the other side of whatever happens. Or you can look to not dive all in, because that'd be stupid as well, but think about looking into this asset and how can you make it a part of your portfolio in a smart and considered way. That's the only thing I would say to people. I'm not saying buy it today. I'm saying look into it, try and investigate it, start buying some, because a lot of the critics that accuse it of being worth nothing have never transacted on it. They've never bought any or transferred any or looked at the code or looked at the engineering or worked out how Bitcoin mining works. They've just come to a conclusion before they've done the work. Do the work first, buy a little bit, transact with it, see what it means. And I think, my opinion, obviously I'm a permanent Bitcoin bull, but I think time is running out for you to get in to make the gains on offer if you leave it too late.
And I guess there's a huge tailwind in that the Trump administration, that would have been a clear fork in the road, right? If the Democrats had won, they would to have plans in place to limit the development that could take place in the US. It would probably still happen, but just in other jurisdictions. But the Trump administration won. It was a complete red wash, and there's clear objectives there to make the US the crypto capital of the industry, really.
Yeah, President Trump was literally President Trump was headlining the Bitcoin conference in May 2024, and he was speaking there saying, "I'll support your right to own Bitcoin, self-custody it, transact how you want. It's not the government's job to tell you what to do with your money or what to invest in." And then he even went further than that and said he'll look into the US government buying Bitcoin itself as a strategic reserve, as a way to hedge their bets against the falling value or the falling purchasing power of the US dollar. So that's why the Bitcoin price is pumping right now. Trump got in on last week. People know he made these comments. And as you said, before that, if the Democrats had got in, Bitcoin still rose about 120% last year through a Biden presidency. It's designed to be anti-fragile. So the people that think the US government can kill it, they never could, but they can make life harder and they can slow the adoption process down. So when Trump got election, that left tail risk, I will call it, has evaporated. So you've taken away a massive source of people's
hesitation, reason for
hesitation.
Yeah.
Now you've got a government that's a US president that's at the very least, and I would say he's more than this, but at the very least neutral, and will let people in Bitcoin and crypto do what they want. At where he could be going, he's actually going to be supporting it. He's going to be getting the US government to buy it, put it in their treasury, and so that's why people are from what I'm seeing on the ground, there's a bit of a scramble. That the price movement over the weekend wasn't just retail traders, gambling amongst themselves. It was some serious big buys, and there's rumors out there that some countries are starting to, other countries, if they know the US wants to add this as a strategic reserve, what would you do if you were, Switzerland or Qatar or UAE? You would probably try and buy some on your balance sheet before the US did if you could. So there's
Mm.
rumors that there are some countries, other countries, there already are some countries like Bhutan and El Salvador that own Bitcoin reserves, but maybe some more of the more developed countries as well might be getting into it.
Well, let's shift focus to your piece today because it encompasses all these ideas anyway. But you start your piece with a fascinating story of Theo. Now that's not his real name, but
Yeah.
you've given him a pseudonym and his unconventional polling method. Um, so, can you explain that story? Why you started with that, and how retail investors can apply this sort of concept of seeking truth to their own
Yeah.
investment research?
So it was a really interesting trading story. So this guy is an anonymous French trader, obviously quite rich already, but he laid down a $50 million bet on Donald Trump was winning the U.S. election, right? Which, even if you're rich, that's still a fair bit of money to put down. And he obviously won his bet, and he made about 50 million. But it was how he did it, because he laid down that bet at a time when all the polls, all the mainstream media had Kamala as a favorite. They said it might be close, but every poll after poll, had her winning. And so for him to take the other side of the bet, it's not the kind of thing, not the kind of money you'd put down on just a hunch. So he had an idea: are the polls correct? So he commissioned his own poll, but instead of phoning up people and asking who they were going to vote for, his posters asked who they thought their neighbor was going to vote for. Sorry. And the idea behind that was that some people are still hesitant to reveal their preferences, especially for Trump in public. But if they won't be as hesitant to reveal who they think their neighbor will vote for, and that will indirectly reveal their own preference. So he did that, and the results were overwhelmingly in favor of Trump, not just a little
Right.
bit. And so he's looking at his polls versus the official polls, and he's going, at the very least, the odds of a 55-45 in favor of Kamala are wrong. At best, this is like a lay down bet. And he put the money on through a decentralized prediction market, actually called Polymarket, and he won his bet. But it was the way he did it. He found what he did was he found a source of alpha, which in the market says your advantage over the market. So what has the market got right? What might it have wrong? And you look at the probabilities and the risk versus reward. And if you see the markets misprice something and you're pretty confident of it, that's your alpha. That's your source of alpha. So what he did was he found the truth of something that the market had missed. He did that by ignoring the mainstream news. He did that by ignoring mainstream posters. He did his own work. As I was talking about, like when you get involved in Bitcoin, you have to do your own work. You can't rely on other people, because if they've not done the work, why are they telling you what to do?
Mm.
And then when he'd done all that, he implemented his strategy. He put down real money. He had skin in the game, and it worked for him. And it's just an example, I think, of one, the market knows better usually than experts or posters, because the odds in Polymarket, funnily enough, which is a prediction market,
They were
they
remarkably accurate, actually.
yeah, they were accurate. They actually were the only poll that had Trump ahead. So and that was real people putting real money down, the wisdom of the crowd, as you might put it. So that was another tell that the Polymarket betters were like, Trump's got this one. And Polymarket as well called the election a full 4 or 5 hours before the mainstream news did, which is an eternity in the news world. And there's a side story to that about the death of the legacy media. The legacy media has vested interest. It's got political bias. It's also got a vested interest in drawing out these elections and making them seem close so they can sell ads during the whole shebang. Um, and so this decentralized prediction market was more accurate, more timely, and people like Elon Musk are tweeting about it now, saying as well, this is the way of the future. Why do we need legacy media when we can find our own facts by doing our own research? And you are the news. He posted that on Twitter the other day. Elon Musk, you are the news. You don't need to be gate kept from information. The wisdom of the crowd is a real thing. The sort of pushback against would be that it's like sometimes you get the madness of the crowd as well, which was the other famous saying about crowds. And in short terms, that can be true as well. But over time, generally, the weight of numbers proves the wisdom of the crowd. And I just think that story was just super interesting to me because it's just an example of all the things I've been talking about today and for a long time, where do your research, find your own source of truth, don't rely on other people, do your own work, put down your own money and implement your own investment strategy.
Yeah, but it allowed you to open out and have a sort of a thought experiment to what sectors and themes might play out over the next few years. And obviously, Bitcoin's one, we've spoken about that. The other
Yeah.
two was AI and oil and gas. So I was gonna say maybe Bitcoin's the most immediate thing, but what about the other two? Like where's the opportunity there and why?
Yeah. So Bitcoin, like I said, most immediate, already pumping, and because that left tail risk is gone, pro Trump presidency. It's a pretty easy story to get your head around. To understand how high it can get, you need to do a little bit of work to understand what it is, what function it fulfills, how to buy it. And I do have a course on that, which we might put a link on the bottom if people are interested in doing that. With AI, it's just a theory, just a thesis, but you've got to remember who was Trump's best buddy during this election. It was Elon Musk. Elon Musk is big into AI amongst a bunch of other stuff that he also does. He's in the process of raising a few $1 billion at a $40 billion valuation for his company called XAI. Now, he has or is likely to be given a mandate by Donald Trump to make the US government more efficient. And before the election, Elon Musk was saying he reckons he can save the US budget $2 trillion a year, which is a massive amount. Now, I was thinking about that and looking at that and looking at what Elon Musk does. Look, for example, when he bought over Twitter, he got rid of 80% of the staff and he replaced it with technology and it works fine. So he knows how to run a company and find efficiencies. I think if you put the two and two together, he's going to look to use AI in different parts of the government to make it more efficient, cost saving, a bunch of stuff. And I think that in itself will spur the adoption of AI in general, because if you've got the US government start to implement AI led solutions, that's going to encourage more investment, research and development, more companies to come in. And I think it's just going to help. 2025 will be the next up leg in the AI story. It's definitely a narrative at the very least, and
Mm-hmm.
markets, especially speculative markets, run on narratives. So I think it's an interesting time to get into AI, because if you remember at the start of the year, AI was pumping, the video was going nuts, everyone was going on. It's since went in a bit of a lull, probably the last 6 months. But that's the kind of pullback you need as an investor. The story itself hasn't changed, and with this Trump presidency, with Elon Musk on board, with a mandate to save government money, I think AI is going to be a huge part of healthcare, bureaucracy, a bunch of stuff like that.
Yeah.
The other idea was one James Cooper, our geologist colleague, was talking about, which is the old drill baby drill slogan that Trump had last time around, which is spur some sort of energy renaissance back to fossil fuels, coal, oil, gas. I think that'll throw up interesting investment angles. One thing I'm looking at though is that um, I reckon the deregulatory nature of the nuclear opportunity might be the way to play it from my perspective as a technology investor.
Yeah.
He's already got people on board who are investing in stuff like small modular reactors. He has said that deregulating, you got to understand, with nuclear facilities, a major part of the cost is the regulation. So when people talk about how expensive nuclear energy is, a lot of that is regulation, but that varies by country. You can find countries where the regulation isn't as large a cost, and places like Australia where it's a massive cost. And I'm not saying you don't need regulation, because obviously you do with nuclear, but there's probably a happy medium somewhere there where you can find cost effective ways to be safe but also to get these projects up and running. And I think Trump's idea is to turn the US into an age of energy abundance, like make energy available to everyone who needs it. You're going to need that for AI as well, by the way. So there's a corollary there. There's even a corollary to Bitcoin, because Bitcoin mining actually helps. It uses energy, but also helps people invest in energy infrastructure, because you've got this constant buyer of last resort, who will buy any energy that you don't need all the time. So I think getting cheap energy, getting multiple sources of energy is going to be a big story. Even the flow-on effects of that. I read the other day that Germany's government is in disarray right now. Germany was obviously a fairly left-leaning government, more in line with the Democrat ethos around politics, and they're falling apart right now. And a big part of that is they've stuffed up their energy policy by trying to transition to renewables without having that interim source of energy. Now, I know they had the gas line to Russia, which blew up, so that's scuppered them in some ways. But the government's falling apart. It looks like they might have to call a snap election. And one of the major parties there is saying they want to put their nuclear
Back on
plants
the thing.
back
Yeah.
on, which they just turned off.
Yeah.
So Yeah, I think there's these little second and third order effects playing out with energy, which make it a really interesting place for investors to look. And I'm not like 100% sure where the investment angles lie yet, but I think nuclear is part of it somewhere.
Yeah, there's another narrative, isn't it, that the Trump or the Republicans or you know that they're sort of they're pro oil and gas, therefore they're anti EV. You know, which is as far as I can see it, they're working in tandem, right? It's not that they're just against forced. You know, don't abandon one sector and just put all your eggs in this one thing, which the infrastructure's not there yet. And actually,
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
I think Elon Musk. I saw a video that he did on the weekend. He's actually sort of calling. It's kind of weird. It's the first time this has happened too. Like the oil and gas, like General Motors has got a huge lobby group, and
yeah,
they
right.
managed to get all these subsidies for EVs. And Elon's actually calling for them to be ripped out because you know, even though he actually Tesla probably benefits from them, I don't think they instigated them though.
Yeah, right. Yeah, look, well, that's the other point. I mean, if I'm going to say that Musk's influence on Trump is good for AI, then maybe it's good for EVs as well. And I think EVs are coming. If you look at the Chinese EVs, they're cheap as they're really cheap, and they're competitive now. And again, but this is where the story gets interesting. China
Mm,
has created the EVs that apparently we need for climate change, right?
mm,
And yet Europe's just slapped all these taxes on them so people can't afford them. Now, to me,
mm,
well, how can climate change be this massive issue of our time? And that here's a solution, but you don't want to do it for economic reasons. And I think stuff like that, people are getting a little bit wise to that, and they're seeing that a lot of this stuff, especially around energy, is to do with people trying to impose their own power or their own investments on other people. And I think, at my take, probably agree with you. Trump or Republican admin will be more about, let's get the cheapest sources of energy so we can be an energy superpower and we can have access to that so we can drive AI technology and other stuff.
mm,
Um, and it will be agnostic, which, from some people's perspective might be a bad thing. But I think from the economic perspective and the investing
mm.
perspective, it will be good for a lot of industries.
Yeah. So look, the big takeaway, I guess, from your piece is that you emphasise that you need to try and find alpha in truth, right? This concept a bit, and that goes beyond mainstream thinking. Just any takeaways? What specific research methods or sources that you can recommend investors looking at to sort of develop that
Yeah,
edge?
look, I get a lot of my news these days not from mainstream news. I might check the headlines out, but I rarely read the pieces.
Well, it's good to know what the
Yeah.
mainstream is being
Like the
fed.
Age, News.com, The Guardian, even Australian Financial Review. I might just check the headlines. I
Yeah.
generally don't read it. Sometimes you find a good piece every now and again, but I get a lot of my stuff through Twitter. And look, I've been on Twitter for a long time, so I've got a sort of curated source of people that I follow and I've picked up because they are an expert in a specific area. So I tend not to look for necessarily journalists, because journalists are like a jack of all trades, and a lot of the time that's a bad thing for investing because they miss the detail and they miss the nuance. They might tell a good story and write well, but they miss the sort of nuance and the detail. So it's hard to say anyone's place, but on Twitter you can find people that are specialists in different areas. I follow renewable energy specialists, I follow nuclear advocates, I follow Bitcoin people, I follow EU officials that hate Bitcoin. I try to follow people on both sides of a story, uh, so I don't get too much bias in what I'm thinking. But I try to find experts who write stuff that maybe try and refute it. But I don't necessarily believe either side. I get their opinions, and then you go one step further and investigate what makes sense. To give an example of how that's worked, I used to think that renewables and clean energy was necessary, and yet probably over the past year or year and a half, I've been following some nuclear advocates, and they've been basically arguing their points very well and how they help the climate and stuff like that. And the arguments pushed back against them haven't made sense when I've done the research in a bunch of stuff. So that's my opinion. I could be wrong on that, but that's how I try and frame my own opinions. Like, try and see how people think something will work, what the critics say, and what part makes sense to me. And that's an evolving process as well. But eventually, at some stage, you're never going to know 100% either, are you? Your search for truth never ends. You have to be open minded. At the same time, you have to have conviction that when you do make an investment, you're making conviction on what you think is the best thing at that time.
Hmm.
And you're never going to know 100% if that's correct or not. And so you have to have some maybe criteria in the back of your head which would say why you might be wrong, and then you follow the story. And if those criteria that you've preset are never met, then you have your conviction and you bet, and that's part of having a system that works for you, I think.
Yeah, interesting. All right, well, Ryan, we'll leave it there for today. Great chat. We'll take it up again next week. If you'd like to read Ryan's piece today, really fascinating after the week we just had, there you'll find it's the first link detailed below. And if you are interested in having Ryan help you make the first moves into the crypto market in a sensible and smart way, we also have a 4-week course called the Bitcoin Investors Launchpad. We'll provide the link in the comments below as well. But check out the article. It's 100% free, and we'll go from there. Thanks, Ryan. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Fat Tail Daily. If you're ready to take a new approach to building wealth, avoiding the same old mainstream ideas, and investigating new market trends, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on post notifications so you don't miss a single video. And as a thank you, we've got a free report just for you. It is packed with actionable insights that show you how to capitalize on an alternative investment idea that you'll unlikely find anywhere else. You can download it right now by clicking on the link in the description below. So, if you're ready to discover strategies that the traditional market just doesn't offer, grab your free report and start exploring what the parallel economy can do for you. Until next time.